our recycling program moving forward.
No, Mom, look, no plastic bags.
Do your part to keep our recycling bag-free. Trash the tanglers or return them to participating retailers. For more information, visit tampabayrecycles.org.
Oh man, here comes Arnie again. Check this out.
What's up, Arnie? What are you doing? You made a mess in my hallway.
Hey, Arnie. Looks like you could use a hand. Let me help you.
You don't need superpowers to be a hero. Help make Hillsborough bully-free.
Good morning and welcome to Hillsborough Transportation Planning Organization meeting for March the 20th. Let us stand and repeat the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before I call for the roll call, I'd just like to read a memo from Commissioner Cohen. I will be attending the Aviation Authority meeting this morning and be unable to be at today's TPO board meeting. So I've read it in the minutes, and this is the reasons why Commissioner Cohen is absent. Roll call, Gail, please.
Commissioner Myers.
Here.
Mayor Ross. Here. Commissioner Owen.
Here.
Commissioner Wastel.
Here.
Commissioner Cohen is excused. Commissioner Kim.
Here.
Councilmember Clendenin. Councilmember Hurtak.
Here.
Councilmember Maniscalco.
Here.
Mayor Kilton.
Here.
School Board Member Rendon.
Here.
Charles Klug. Here. Gina Du.
Here.
Greg Slater.
Here.
Justin Willits.
Here.
Planning Commissioner Joseph.
Here.
We do have an in-person quorum.
Thank you. And move right into approving the minutes for February the 14th. Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second to accept the minutes. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposes? Have none. Gail, Commissioner on second. Okay, thank you. For our public comments, we have 7, maybe 8 speakers. You each have 3 minutes. First speaker, Andrew Morris. Good morning. Andrew Morris.
Good morning. Thank you for giving me a little bit of time to speak. It's very nice that someone representing from Amtrak is coming to speak at a Hillsborough TPO meeting today. State-supported Amtrak service, especially if like that would provide like a high quality connection to like other cities in Florida, and have multiple trains a day and not be reliant on long distance service that runs late because of delays in other states. One thing I would hope is that Amtrak reaches out to Pinellas County to look at the potential of re-extending Amtrak service back to Pinellas County. Pinellas County has around 1 million people in population and about 15 million visitors a year. Amtrak service to Pinellas County was cut in 1984 because of federal budget issues, and the Amtrak throughway bus service that replaced it had significantly less ridership, and the ridership still hasn't recovered, even though Amtrak's having a record ridership again, and is basically fully recovered from a COVID ridership slump to back to pre-pandemic ridership, especially in some of the state-supported routes are even higher than they were pre-2020. So it'd be nice, especially with how bad the traffic is around spring break. I got to experience how long it took to get out of Pinellas County. It took over 2 hours. So I was heading near Orlando. So even though the existing tracks aren't as direct as over the Howard Franklin, you're still not sitting, you wouldn't be sitting in traffic, and you'd be on the train nice and comfortable, reading on your iPad, eating a snack, and not sitting in traffic on I-4 and I-275. Thank you for giving me time to do a comment, and I'm going to end it here. Thanks again.
Thank you. Rick Fernandez, good morning.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Good morning to you and to the rest of the board. These comments are in my personal capacity and relate to the interstate barrier to be installed along the eastern boundary of Robles Park in Tampa Heights. This is a subject that's been brought up before you on at least 2 other occasions in the last couple of months. I'm requesting the installation of a living or green barrier in lieu of the planned 14-foot concrete wall. Definitionally, what I'm talking about are trees and lush landscaping layered appropriately to provide natural sound and pollution protection for this historic park. The green barrier should incorporate plantings on both the interstate and park sides of the bordering North Elmore Avenue. This will require a cooperative approach between FDOT and the City of Tampa, together with the Tampa Heights neighborhood and the Tampa Heights Civic Association. The requested living green barrier treatment is in alignment with options offered, suggested, presented by Justin Hall and David Gwynn of FDOT District 7 back in 2022. It is the environmentally sound, fiscally responsible, and politically responsive approach to a request coming from the residents of this neighborhood. FDOT presented alternatives for the barrier during the TPO board meeting on January 11, 2022. A link to that YouTube has been provided to you, hopefully by staff. Timestamp 1:17:33 is the beginning and it ends at 1:20. It's a 3-minute presentation out of a rather long meeting. The options presented by Mr. Gwynn and by Mr. Hall included a green trellis, as well as fully landscaped options, hedge, trees, others, as well as an 8-foot barrier and the 14-foot barrier, which is now the intent of DOT, as I understand it. Interestingly, the cost projections presented back in January of 2022 were as follows. The 14-foot wall, as currently planned, was $1.3 million. The 8-foot wall, $441,000. The green trellis, which would be theoretically acceptable to us, $504,000. And then the fully landscaped barrier, which is right on track with what we're asking for, what I'm asking for, that cost is variable depending on the plants and trees that are selected. In short, the DOT currently is pursuing the most expensive, least environmentally sensitive, and least popular alternative. I will say the DOT has facilitated 2 meetings with the neighborhood at the park since our last meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. Your time is up. Thank you so much for your comments. Our next speaker is Lena Young-Green. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for another opportunity to ask for your support and help with putting a natural green wall behind a historic, very, very much neighborhood park that is right in the middle of our neighborhood. If you think about traveling the interstate and just interacting with walls and then coming across an area that's all naturally grown, that even gives a break to the constant traveling along the interstate. But from the perspective of the residents, we are asking again for this natural green wall that will line a historic park, a park where our children play, where our community hangs out, where we play, we have sports happening there, and to have a wall that captures and traps the particulate matter that then rises into the air and comes into our community when it gets cooler in the day, in place of trees that do so much more than a wall. It seems as though it would be a natural and reasonable request to have the natural walls, the natural barriers there. We did, as Mr. Fernandez pointed out, DOT did tell us that that was an option, and because it's one of the lower costs, we assumed that that would be the one that would be selected. Please, we're asking for you all to continue to, or have DOT be directed to work with us on getting this wall. We've talked to the city of Tampa, and in the mayor's project of planting many, many trees, thousands between the next 6 years, this would be a contribution to that. The park department has indicated that they would have trees and be able to be a part of this effort. We're talking about a three city block length in an area that is so encased and so connected to where the interstate connects in all those different roads, finish right there at our park and in our community. So please, please have DOT to go ahead and do the natural wall in that area because of the impact to our community and the environmental impact to us who have to live in the places where we chose to live even before interstate, the many, many walls of interstate
Thank you,
have
Lena.
been put in.
Your time is up. Thank you so much for your comments. Our next speaker is Paula Meckley. Paula?
Yes,
Good
yes, thank
morning.
you. Good morning. My name is Paula Meckley. I'm the president of the Tampa Garden Club, and I just wanted to give our support of the planting of the green wall and the trees and the greenscape along Interstate 275 and I-4, where that combination is coming in behind Robles Park. As a big supporter of green space in Tampa, we believe that there are so many benefits to this green wall besides versus the 14-foot concrete wall. And I know you've heard it many times, but these trees can absorb all that carbon monoxide that the increased traffic will produce. It cleans the soil. It filters runoff from pollutions, these trees. It's a wind barrier. It breaks the wind. It absorbs the dust from and all the things that get kicked up on this very, very busy road. It'll also add to the park, where their kids play, and this is a neighborhood area. So having these trees is vitally important to the health of that community. And there are many, many studies about heat islands and how they trap pollutants with vehicles traveling up and down throughout the day, and then the hot sun, beating down on this neighborhood. It can have negative effects. With the rapid urbanization over the last few decades, the tremendous changes to our land use and the land covered pattern of urbanization, taking impervious areas or pervious areas and making them impervious is causing all kinds of problems in our communities. We're decreasing the sky view factors. All of these things contribute to these heat islands. So the Tampa Garden Club would love to help and be involved. We would love to offer any opportunity that we can to help with this. And we support the green barrier versus the 14-foot concrete wall. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Dominique Cobb? Good morning.
Greetings, Chair and Board. My name is Dominique Cobb. I am an advocate and also a business owner in Hillsborough County, City of Tampa. Today, I would like to speak about the 14-foot wall in the middle of a thriving community. The African-American community has dealt with injustice with planning and environmental policies for generations. I ask that you also please consider the 2016 tree canopy and urban forest findings for the City of Tampa in your consideration. In those findings, which happen to affect, the City of Tampa and the tree canopy, this shows that with healthy trees, you are not only adding to the improvement of air quality, but also the health quality. In the City of Tampa and in East Tampa, there is a high amount of children dealing with allergy issues, dealing with multiple health issues because of the rapid rate of just traffic in the area. With this green space, this will help alleviate that. And again, let's take in consideration, with public policy, we have to do what is fair and considerable. With all of the stakeholders who have joined these meetings and have dedicated the time, there has been an outcry of listen. We have to listen to these stakeholders, which is the community. We have lived here for years. We have made this place a livable place. I want to make sure that we also consider this is a place of leisure as well. That park is very beautiful, but to have to look at a high wall, that is not aesthetically pleasing. So I do ask that you consider all the words from the community and also the business owners in the area. Thank you.
Thank you. David Coleman? Good morning.
Good morning. My name is David Coleman. Thanks. I was told by a lawyer, don't talk numbers, you lose people, but I have to. I realized this morning that I started coming here like 5 years ago, and it was after the death of Josiah Pinner. And I started paying attention to what was happening on the FDOT roads of North Nebraska and North Florida Avenue. I live on North Florida Avenue. I've been following the numbers of the deaths in Hillsborough County, and this year the number is up. It's 233 deaths this past year. Typically, there's 7,000 hit and runs on our roadways. I can't count the thousands of people that end up in our trauma emergency rooms. Those numbers are worse than the entire U.S. military, and this is one county in the country of the United States of America. There's 1.5 million residents in Hillsborough County, and at some point, some of them are going to wake up and come down here and ask what the heck you guys been doing, because these are the same exact numbers that I was talking about 5 years ago. There's some recent changes, which I really love to see, the little islands on North Nebraska, and there were some lights added right where Josiah Pinner was killed. The crosswalk still isn't operational, is not in the right location. I don't know who designed that. I recently was at a meeting several months ago. It's a Vision Zero plan, and it's so simple. It's to restripe the road and to lower the limits on West Waters and West Sly. It'll save lives, and there's no action coming from it. There's nothing happening. Simple things like lowering limits saves lives. I'm sorry I have to disagree with you, FDOT, but it's a trope to say that it doesn't save lives. It will. People are not that stupid that if you lower the limit, that still 1.5 million people are going to do 55 if the limit says 35 or 40. In what world are there sidewalks 2 feet away from cars doing 45 and 50 miles an hour on North Florida Avenue? I recently took a drive in my neighborhood just to see, because I started saying, you know, and they cleared some bush away, and I saw another white sign. So I took a drive within a half mile north and a half mile south of my house on North Florida Avenue. There are 7 white signs of people that died in my neighborhood in the past several years, and 3 that I know of. These 2 young ladies, 15 years old, 17 and 18 years old, visiting from Columbia, went back in boxes to Columbia, run over by a pickup truck on North Florida Avenue. There are 10 deaths that I know of on North Florida Avenue. Traffic calming, livable roadways, Vision Zero. These things are extremely important
Mr. Coleman.
and need to be addressed by this board and by the second floor downstairs. Thank you.
Staff, please cut him off. Thank you. Our next speaker is Linda Salsina. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Board. Thank you. I am pleased to be here to ask you to please redirect the Department of Transportation to create a green wall next to Robles Park. I'm really impressed. Since our last meeting and the article that I wrote called the Trauma of Cement, something like that, FDOT has met twice with the neighborhood and city park staff to discuss alternatives. And I want to commend FDOT in that in other situations in Ybor City, when the Interstate 4 was widened the last time, they did some really innovative things in terms of moving houses out of the footprint of the interstate, adding additional green space, adding fountains. It shows that there can be, and there has been, innovative, creative thinking on the part of the Department of Transportation. This is yet another opportunity to show some thinking outside of the traditional just building a cement barrier. So we've got 1,500 additional people moving to the Robles Park area in the next few years as the Tampa Housing Authority replaces 350 units with 1,500. That's a significant increase proximate to this park. They will be impacted by the decisions made by you all today. So with great energy and humility, I request that during your meeting, you redirect the Department of Transportation, who has ceased the construction of the 14-foot wall at this moment. They said they have enough to say grace over. they're stepping back from that while you all make a decision and direct them. I think that it could be a win-win-win, and I look forward to your thoughtful consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else to speak for public comments? Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, members of the TPO Board. I'm Bill Roberts, a resident of unincorporated Hillsborough County. I'm here to speak to you briefly on item 7B on your agenda, which has to do with the representation issue on the proposed regional MPO. There's a recommendation, or at least there's been a request by your two neighboring counties that the representation on that regional issue be including the representatives from the Tampa International Airport or the Aviation Authority, as well as Tampa Port Authority. And there has been that request that that representation be by staff as opposed to elected officials. And I support that recommendation. I support that request, and I hope you'll take it seriously. By way of context, let me say that I served on your Citizens Advisory Committee for 7 years. I live in Hillsborough County. I have an office in downtown Tampa. Our company owns hundreds of acres in Pasco County. We own 1,000 acres in Manatee County at the mouth of the Tampa Bay entrance. So I have some perspective on the regional aspects of what you're dealing with. And I think that the representation by these two very important economic driving engines on a regional authority at the highest level by knowledgeable staff will benefit our county as well as the region. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you. This concludes our public comments. We're going to move right into the committee reports and advance comment. Let me just say for the record, Gail, can you record Councilman Clendenin has joined the meeting. Thank you. Rick Fernandez, good morning.
Thank you, Chair, again. Still hear me all right?
Yes.
All right, thank you. For the record, Rick Fernandez, I'm the chair of your CAC. This is my chair's report. Your CAC met on the evening of March 6th. We were bracketed 6 p.m. to just after 8 p.m., as is our norm. We had 14 people in the room, one attended virtually, so we easily met our in-person 7-person quorum. There was one public comment from Lena Young-Green, you're very familiar with at this point. Ms. Green thanked the CAC for bringing forward the Robles Park wall topic to the TPO board and encouraged FDOT to continue to communicate with the citizens in that area. We had 2 action items presented, one of which is on your agenda today, that one being the TIP amendment for the I-4 truck parking facility. CAC approved that TIP amendment unanimously, 14-0. Just a few member comments on that amendment. Included interest in electric or solar charging capabilities and staging during evacuations. There were questions about the source of funding, sustainability features for water runoff, heat islands, and tree canopy. There was also a question as to whether or not there would be any effects on future Brightline routes or route. The other action item, which is not on your agenda, I don't know why, perhaps later in the year, is the multimodal counts report. The CAC appreciated the work to gather non-motorized counts and offered suggestions on when the counts are repeated in the future. I will spare you a full reading of this summary that I have in front of me. It has been provided to you in your package, and I would certainly encourage you to review. The CAC unanimously recommended the TPO board accept the multimodal counts report whenever it is presented to you for action. There were 2 status reports presented to us. One of them is on your agenda. That is the development of the FY 25 and 26 Unified Planning Work Program. UPWP. Members appreciated the preview of the UPWP before it is fully presented to us in April. There were questions on whether local funding is included and the relationship to the long-range transportation plan, the transportation improvement program, and the state of the system report. There was a request for infographics to demonstrate how each federally required document is related to the other. We also had a presentation on the 2050 needs assessment for major projects. That is not on your agenda today, so again, I will spare you the reading and commend the written document to your attention. This report was submitted to the Secretary for inclusion in the record, and I thank you for your time. If there are any questions, I'll be happy to try to field them.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. Next, Harmony McGee. Good morning.
Good morning, Harmony McGee, TPO staff. Regarding today's action items, as you have read, or as you have heard, the Citizen Advisory Committee unanimously approved the I-4 truck parking facility tip amendment. The Technical Advisory Committee also approved this tip amendment. Technical Advisory Committee members did inquire about the number of spaces and access to the site due to accessible truck parking being a nationwide issue. Public comment regarding the tip amendment was also received on Facebook, with Edward Mirjewski urging the TPO board to approve the amendment due to truck parking being an essential element in ensuring drivers adhere to their hours of service rules. A comment was also received on the Northeast Plant City Master Plan from Dave Coleman, who stated that he believes East and South County receive a disproportionate amount of revenues while other parts of the county, including Plant City, are receiving less funding and attention. Regarding major projects outlined in the Access 2050 Long-Range Transportation Plan Survey, Mike Lamarca expresses concern for projects in West Central Tampa area by highlighting a recent crash involving a bicycle. He urged for greater Vision Zero advocacy and prioritization of safety when considering road widening projects. Additional comments were received pertaining to the Access 2050 Transportation Survey via email and are outlined in your packets for your review. We also received a late email from Rick Fernandez, which was not able to be included in the packet, reiterating his request for a living wall along I-275 near Robles Park. This concludes my report.
Thank you so much. We'll move right into the consent agenda. Oh, Mayor Ross.
Madam Chair, I'd like to pull item C for discussion or questions.
Go ahead.
You want me to proceed now? Or?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Dr. Wong, I don't know if you want to, I don't know how to handle this. I don't know if you want to have this discussion now, or perhaps maybe present item C at our next meeting, so I'll leave that up to you. But I looked at that for the public. I'm talking about the multimodal counts report that's on the consent agenda. There's some interesting data in there that one of the slides, you really have to kind of magnify it in order to digest what it tells you. But there's one slide in particular that really tells the story better than maybe the others. I have some questions about that, and they have to do with what happens to that report now, and how does some of that data inform our decisions for the projects that we're going to be prioritizing under the Vision Zero category in June. Because there's some, excuse me, there's some real rich data in there if you spend a little time looking at the chart. It's a little overwhelming, but if you start looking at the granular categories, there's things in there that are interesting, like it's not just pedestrian counts. When those pedestrians are on the sidewalk or wherever they need to be, that's probably not a problem. I don't know that that's really significant statistic. But when there's corridors where the pedestrians or bicycles are located in the roadway or off of the designated path, I would assume if you overlaid that with crash data that would be the highest injury corridor locations. My questions concern how do those locations rise to the top, or how does this report inform our prioritization of those Vision Zero projects? And one of them that comes to mind, I'm just trying to remember a couple of them, but one of them as a public comment, one of our speakers mentioned Florida Avenue today, and I noticed that Florida and Waters area comes up in a couple of different places on that, both in pedestrian and bicycles. And I don't know what the problem is. I don't know if there's not facilities there, or if it's a behavioral issue that people are just crossing mid-block or not riding on the, I don't know. But those are the questions that I have. And I'm just wondering where this report goes and how does that data get plugged into our planning so that we're directing dollars at the right stuff?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think that I may be able to field most of those questions. If not, I'll defer to the project manager. But the multimodal counts report marks kind of a new initiative for the TPO. Previously, when we were doing bike and ped counts, it was done in the old school way with just a consultant standing on the corner, clicking the counter anytime they observe a cyclist or a pedestrian. By using the camera counts and video processing, we're better able to determine how users are interacting with the facility, like you said. So if there is a bike lane or a side path, the cameras can tell us whether or not they're being utilized and to what extent. The way that the multimodal counts report will be used is to supplement data that would have to be procured anyway if we were going to take on a safety study. And so when this board sees the list of planning studies that we are intending to take on over the next 2 years, you will see that there are a number of studies on Vision Zero corridors. And because these multimodal counts were focused on those high injury corridors, we will already have good bike and ped data. And from the report, we can draw inferences about whether or not the facility is engineered to provide comfort and convenience and safety to cyclists and pedestrians. So one of the recommendations one of the recommendations coming out of the report is to do a little bit of a deeper analysis to figure out what may be causing low bike ped volumes in between high volume corridors, right? So if there's a corridor with a lot of people using a bike facility and then the corridor we studied has a lower amount, that might suggest that it could be improved by engineering changes. The bike ped counts program is something we take on regularly, and it improves the regional demand model, which feeds into the long-range plan. Again, it's a complementary data set for our safety studies. It can be used in a number of other ways. And I've pretty much exhausted my knowledge on the topic, so if you have any other questions, I'll defer to Ben.
All right, so it just seems like there's some actionable stuff that's in that report as it is, if it were simply overlaid with the crash data. If you've got a location where people are in the road, and there's a column that says in the road, if they're in the road they're pedestrians in the roadway, and you overlay that with crash data that says, yeah, we've had, 20 pedestrian crashes there, and all of those people have been in the roadway, well, there's a sidewalk right there. So none of this is in Temple Terrace. If it were, I'd be asking our police chief to take a look at this and see what we need to do to change behavior. But it seems like there's some low-hanging fruit that doesn't require a whole lot of additional study in order to do some things. And it may reveal that there's an expensive project needed, or it may simply reveal that people aren't using the facilities that are already there. They're just not using the crosswalks, or they're, fairly simple fixes that may save some lives. So anyway, I don't want to beat this to death. It's on the consent agenda, but I found this report to be very interesting and potentially useful depending on how we use the data. But if it's one of those reports that we just do and then it goes on a shelf and we don't do anything with it, then it's really not doing us anything. So thank you.
Yeah, I will add that our Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee asked us to do a deeper dive into the analysis that we provided. And of course, all the local governments have representation on both the BPAC and the TAC. And the results of the report should inform them to maybe go out and investigate why there are low cyclist volumes on a road that has adequate facilities. It could be a maintenance issue. Maybe there was just debris in the facility on a given day, but it could be an engineering review as well.
Okay, Commissioner Kemp? Thank you.
I was also very interested in this, and I know that I spoke with Mr. Wong when we were talking about this and the fact that it was on the consent agenda, but I find it really promising that there is now kind of a new method of counting and to get more information and to really try to learn more about this. And I think it's coming at a time, if I'm not mistaken, but who knows how accurate even our counts are now, but in the past have been with, not having, not looking at this all the time, but it seems to be really, I feel like our pedestrian use and our bicycle use is really, really growing. And so I think it's really good to be tracking this and looking at this and being aware of what we need to do. And downtown too, of course, the scooter use, which just coming out of the garage yesterday, maybe it was my timing, but a scooter was going across the sidewalk in front of my car. And then at the very next light, there was a crosswalk in the light, and I'd waited for a long time, and right when the light turned green for me, people walked across the street, and I think that people are learning more when you have less. Sometimes when you have less busy times, people are less aware, and it has caused me to wonder. I've been really wondering about right on red for some of these areas. It seems like a really dangerous protocol for pedestrians and bicyclists in very many areas. The right on red, I think, is really challenging, and I don't know how we get to start to review that, but I think that that's important. But I like the idea of bringing this forward, as I had mentioned the other day, in a more comprehensive way so that we kind of look at it more closely. And as to two, I don't know about the, people are doing, as a street gets more used, like I can speak to Florida Avenue a lot in terms of people, businesses being set up that people are attracted to on both sides of the street, and there's no crosswalk anywhere near. People will cross the street, and there'll be lots more people because there's lots more people using the facilities when they're not car lots. They're just, and it's there's a lot more demand for pedestrian crosswalks to be more frequent. And it's a long. We just had an issue before land use yesterday. People would have to walk 1/6 of a mile. Might sound like not a lot to us, but if you're walking 1/6 of a mile there to the crosswalk and then 1/6 of a mile back, just to get to something, it's a lot more challenging.
Okay. Councilwoman Hurtag.
Thank you. This is a really important issue. I thank Mayor Ross for bringing this forward to talk about. We really should stop encouraging people to bike on these major corridors. That is not the place for bikes. And FDOT is actually right now in the middle of building a bike boulevard that is parallel to both Florida Avenue, which is a much safer way to encourage biking. So I would argue that some of those corners that we're not seeing bicyclists, it's because they realize it's not safe and they found another way to cross the street or another path that's safer. But Florida Avenue is not what I would recommend bicyclists to use at any point in time. But as I actually was talking to the director of our mobility department, Vic Bide, yesterday about this very issue. And after the FDOT bike boulevards are finished on both Ola Avenue and Central Avenue, how are we going to incentivize people to use them? And I think that's kind of goes to the crux of what you're talking about, is how do we change behavior? So I would love to hear more about, or when you're researching, like how do we change that behavior to encourage people to use those bike boulevards and to incentivize more bike boulevards network to be developed? to get people off of these major corridors and hopefully save some lives.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, can we have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda?
Move for approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to move for approval. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposers? That motion is carried. Thank you. I'm going to go right into our action items. Connor, good morning.
Good morning, TPO Board. Connor Trejos McDonald, TPO staff. I'm here to present the TIP amendment on the I-4 truck parking facility. So first, I'll provide a quick introduction to the project. There's a critical need for truck parking all over the U.S. and in Florida, particularly along the interstate corridors like I-4. Because hours of service policies, which require truck drivers to take breaks after a certain number of hours, there are limited spaces to meet this demand. This has left many drivers parking in the right-of-way of exit ramps and at rest areas. This is both unsafe for the driver and for other roadway users. There are currently only 90 public truck parking spaces from Daytona Beach to Tampa. And to meet this demand, the proposed solution is to construct a 120 parking space facility along I-4 in Hillsborough County on Hillsborough County, Polk County line. The new truck parking facility will be 120 spaces near that Polk County line on the exit on County Line Road. There will be 6 electric hookups to provide for refrigeration and other electrical needs, pedestrian infrastructure to access nearby commercial amenities, road ramp improvements, and it's also connected to FDOT's truck parking availability system to assist commercial vehicle operators in identifying available parking. So here's a rendering you can see from the southwest corner looking northeast. And the summary of changes, the TIP amendment itself is to add $5.3 million in state funds for construction for improvements to adjacent roadways. This includes lighting adjustments, intersection improvements to I-4 westbound ramps to add traffic signal and provide dual right and dual left turn lanes on the off-ramp and modify lane configuration, reduce radii and the addition of truck aprons to slow vehicular turns while accommodating trucks, modification of traffic signals and reconfiguration of lanes along County Line Road, new signal and pavement markings, new lighting, signalization, and ITS systems, and resurfacing along South French Road. The timeline is as follows: letting in fall 2024, and spring 2025 would start construction and open in spring 2026. As part of our outreach, 21 days prior to today, the March 20th, 2024 TPO board meeting, we issued a press release, posted on social media, and posted a webpage as well. With that, the recommended action is to approve the TIP amendment to add construction funding to the I-4 truck parking facility project. This is a roll call vote, and with that, I'll take any questions or comments.
Okay. Mel Kilton, thank you, Connor.
Yes, I just want to obviously state the obvious for Plant City. We've had millions of square feet of industrial warehouse and logistics space that we've added in East County over the past several years. And it's not just for East Hillsborough County, but there's a lot that's happening in Western Polk County as well that's impacting that area. And anecdotally, I see it every day driving around town where trucks are parked under I-4, overpass or on the side of frontage road. So it's definitely a need, and I appreciate FDOT being thoughtful about the concerns there, and it's definitely going to be helpful for us in Plant City. I did want to comment as well, Mr. Fernandez with the CAC, they talked about stormwater, and something that's very much on my mind all over Plant City, but certainly in the northeast quadrant. And I want to take the opportunity to thank District 7 and also Commissioner Owen for working with Plant City in addressing this issue. We're talking about an interagency opportunity to address, especially in the northeast area of Plant City, and how this project might be able to alleviate some of those pressures. So very much in favor of it, and I'll go ahead and make the motion for approval.
Councilwoman Hurtak.
Thank you, and this is definitely a needed project. I do want to sort of echo the concerns. First of all, I don't know that 6 spaces for electricity is going to be enough. I'm wondering if there is the possibility for expansion on that? Is it like 6 for now and then could grow?
I believe it's 6 for now. I'm not sure about the possibilities for expansion. I believe Brian Hunter can elaborate that, or Justin Hall from FDOT.
Good morning.
Good morning, Justin Hall, FDOT District 7. So to add more than 6 spots, we have to build a new substation. And so if and when that substation is ever built with growth in the area, we can add electrification to more spots. So that's really the limiting factor right now.
Have you considered, and I know this deals with the expense, but it's an awful lot of asphalt. So have you considered maybe like a roof type structure with maybe some solar panels?
I will tell you this, some of the limiting factor on that project is we want a federal grant and we have to stay within the scope.
Okay.
So but I mean, that's something we can always consider in the future. And I mean, we're constantly looking at ways to add more electric vehicle infrastructure. So in fact, this is part of the overall plan along I-4. So we can look at that, but we are limited in scope on this project based on the grant.
Okay. I just overall, that's a lot of asphalt. And I mean, if a trucker is resting during the day, that's still going to be really hot. So I'm trying to think of like ways to just overall, add some shade, add some electricity to it. So maybe it says that there's the possibility for the growth of 250 spaces. So I would suggest that when that time comes, that those are the types of things that you consider as well.
Yeah, we can look at also landscaping, shade trees, things of that nature. So good recommendation.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, Charles.
Yeah, just briefly, I just also want to thank DOT for adding those 6 electrical spaces. Those are reefer plugs. Those are important for the supply chain as far as keeping that cold chain going, and allows these trucks to stop and without running the trucks the entire time. Otherwise, they'd be running those trucks using diesel fuel, et cetera. So those reefer plugs are very important, and we had the same problems at the port. We have to add additional substations when we add reefer plugs. So we appreciate that. Thanks.
Okay. Senator Gail, can we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Myers?
Yes.
Mayor Ross?
Yes.
Commissioner Owen?
Yes.
Commissioner Wastel?
Yes.
Commissioner Kemp?
Yes.
Councilmember Clendenin?
Yes.
Councilmember Hurtak?
Yes.
Councilmember Maniscalco?
Yes.
Mayor Kilton?
Yes.
School Board Member Rendon?
Yes.
Charles Klug?
Yes.
Gina Du?
Yes.
Greg Slater? Justin Willits? Planning Commissioner Joseph?
Yes.
The motion passes 15-0.
Thank you. Now, Director Warren.
Good morning, TPO Board. This is my item. I'm filling in for Gina Torres. Just want to recap the conversations that took place at the February Transportation Management Area Working Group meeting. In February, if you recall, this board adopted a position that it prefers a regional MPO board to have 25 voting members, which is currently the max allowable under state law, and to have 2 of those voting seats reserved for the aviation and port authorities as their regional transportation operators, which would thus leave 23 voting seats to then be apportioned by population among the 3 counties. Our TMA reps presented that position to the Pinellas and Pasco reps at the TMA meeting, and while their proposals for the number of voting seats were presented, we didn't reach a consensus. Some of the TMA members from Pinellas and Pasco stated 21 or 23 seats might be acceptable, so we're not miles apart, but still no consensus on the topic of board size. The second issue that was taken up was the role of the port and the airport. What I heard generally was agreement that the port and the airport do provide a regional point of view, and there were no strong objections to having those 2 authorities serve on the regional board, even as voting members, although some comments were made indicating that those 2 voting seats should come out of Hillsborough's allocation. In the conversation that followed, 2 concerns arose about the role of the port and the airport. First, there was some concern that without explicit prohibition of governing board members of the port and the airport serving on the merged board, that if an elected official or a representative from Hillsborough County were to serve on the merged board as in the seat of the port and the airport, that could kind of tip the scales in favor of Hillsborough. The second point, a follow-up point on that topic is that to alleviate these concerns, we had suggested maybe including a provision in the bylaws requiring staff of the port and the airport to serve on the board. And so what I'm asking of the TPO today is to clarify whether it has any objections to staff representing the port and the airport rather than any member of its governing board. The second topic that arose as a slight point of contention was that Pinella's requested information about Hillsborough County's funding contributions to the airport and to the port and the airport. Staff reached out to both entities and determined that the county does not contribute operating dollars to the Aviation Authority. We were told that all of its operating revenue comes from user fees. The port, on the other hand, has taxing authority, and in fiscal year 2023, it assessed $11.4 million for capital improvements, which amounts to about 11.5% of its annual budget. In addition to the revenue generated through ad valorem, Hillsborough County contributes $150,000 every year for a pilot radio system. So taken together, this amounts to about 11.7% of the port's revenue. If this board approves the item, I will transmit a memo clarifying the position about staff representation versus any member of the governing board, as well as our research about funding contributions to Pinellas and Pasco, kind of teeing up conversations at the next TMA meeting, and hopefully we can resolve those 2 points. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mayor Ross, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, thank you, Dr. Wong, for the recap of the meeting. It was well done. The meeting actually went, in my opinion, pretty well. I say the other 2 counties, their representatives had concerns that we really hadn't thought of. And so when we presented the idea of the port and the airport being on this and coming off the top, their concern primarily was something I don't think we even contemplated, and I told them that, and that was that we would backdoor that to use elected officials that serve on the Aviation Authority Board or the Port Authority Board, and use that as a backdoor to get 2 more county commissioners or the mayor of Tampa or something like that in there. And I assured them that that was not even something that we discussed, and I didn't think, quite frankly, I didn't think we were that diabolical, but hopefully I'm right. But anyway, Dr. Wong and I talked, and I says, you know, if we can get our board to provide that assurance, I think that probably a lot of their resistance or I don't even think it's resistance, hesitation, let me put it that way. I think a lot of their concerns and hesitation might melt away if we provided the assurance that it's going to be staff, not, and really that's what our discussions focused on anyway. We wanted the professional expertise. So that was one thing. The board size discussion, as Dr. Wong indicated, we didn't exactly come to consensus on that, but I don't think we're miles apart either. There was some indication from both counties that they were preferring like the medium-sized board as opposed to the 25-member board. And without exceeding what this board voted to adopt, I told them my sense of our board was that we weren't really dug in on that per se. We wanted to allow enough spots. And I remember some of our discussion focused on we thought it would be more agreeable to them to provide more spots. And so part of the reason that we gravitated that way was out of what we thought there would be to their benefit. And so I don't think that's going to be a big issue if we can get to the point where we're talking, okay, now we know we have the maximum of 23, what would that look like? It was actually pretty productive. Personally, I kind of expected heck no, we're not going to let the airport come off the top or whatever, and I don't think that's what we got. The question of funding is a good question. If I were sitting in their seat, I would have asked the same thing. Are these 2 entities beholden to the county commission because they get funding from them? And if so, they're very unlikely to vote contrary to what the county commission would want. But as it turns out, I don't think the property taxes really count because they have taxing authority, but the was $150,000 or something for radios. I don't think the Port of Tampa Bay is going to be swayed by a radio funding. I don't think that's going to be. So I think we're in a good spot. this was put on the agenda at my request because I'd like to provide them. I didn't want to wait until the next quarterly meeting. Johnny and I talked, and I said, you know, if we can get them answers to this and allay their concerns, maybe we'll be able to talk about board size at the next meeting. So, thank you.
Councilman Clendenin.
Yeah, so when they refer to the Aviation Authority and the port, and they talk about staff, was there a clear definition of what staff? I mean, would they consider the director a staff? Or is that management?
I don't think it was very clear as to what definition they would use to identify staff. I'll kind of defer to the other TMA reps if my memory escapes me, but I don't think we discussed that. Or I don't think it was discussed.
So as long as I think our position should be, we're willing to, you know, not have them as elected officials, but anybody else on the Port Authority, you know, they can designate their own representative as long as they're not an elected official. I mean, I wouldn't think that would be controversial.
As a point of clarification, that's actually defined in our Enabling Act, that the CEO is considered staff, and that's how the board appoints Joe and I as the primary and the secondary member to you all. That's actually a board, but it's clearly defined in our enabling statutes.
So Joe is staff?
Correct.
Interesting.
It's because the CEO, he's staff.
It's kind of contradictory from
normal
nomenclature.
It is, but that's actually in our governing documents.
Well, just so there was no disagreement, maybe just have that clarification that it won't be an elected official, maybe just get away from that term, so.
Okay. Yeah. Commissioner Kemp, thank you.
I think there was, and there's probably here at this meeting by some people just not even understanding, and I would understand why, exactly what the Port Authority and the airport boards are, which are statutorily created by the state legislature. They have 4 gubernatorial appointees, and only in more recent times, well, I say that like a couple decades ago, where the mayor is included on each one, as well as 1 county commissioner. So there's only 6 ward members, and 4 of them are appointed by the governor. And there was even a question of, well, could we get onto those boards? And, you know, an idea about this or that. But structurally, that's what it is. Here at the TPO, that's what we have from all these agencies. We have staff. We don't, because we would either have the 4 gubernatorial appointees or, you know, whoever it was that was on the 1 appointee, I think, to the county commission now on the airport is Harry Cohen, right? And then on the port, it's Mike Owen. That's what I said. So, you know, it would either be those, and if they're already on this, I don't know, you know, but I've always maintained that it should not be. I actually think it, you know, it doesn't need to be a voting person, but you're on there for the expertise of the staff so that they have information to give to you, because the boards are not that informed. That's not their only job that they have. So every person that works for either of those are considered staff under that, and you know, that just makes sense to me. But I think there was a general misunderstanding maybe about how that, you know, that Hillsborough County ran the port somehow or had big representation, or about the structure of those 2 entities.
Thank you. Boardman Regina.
Just a point of clarification, our board is not 4 appointees by the governor, it's 3, and then the county commission selects the person that you all want to represent you on our board, and the mayor sits on our board, and that's been in our statute for quite some time.
And I can also clarify just for that point is we were both created in 1945, and we were created when the war was winding down. There were some surplus war assets. They got Drew Field initially, and we got McCloskey Shipyard, and so at that time, we each had 5 appointed members by the governor. And then you're right, Commissioner, back around 1989 or so, the mayor of the city of Tampa was added to both boards, and we placed one of those, and then also a county commissioner. Since then, our board has been expanded to include 2 more. So we actually have 5 appointed by the governor, 2 with maritime experience, and then the mayor of the city of Tampa, 1 county commissioner. I just also want to mention as far as the amount of money the port does receive is there's $150,000 for a pilot station. That's probably out at Egmont Key, Fort DeSoto area, and if you just go back into history, is Pinellas County broke off from Hillsborough County. It used to be one county. So when that happened, the entire channel stayed with Hillsborough County. And so our channel, Hillsborough County, goes out to the sea buoy. That's all Hillsborough County. So if you go down across the Skyway Bridge, you're leaving Pinellas County, so now you're entering Hillsborough County, then entering Manatee County. That entire channel is within Hillsborough County. So we provide, the pilots and the safety radio stations necessary for that. It's all part of our general channel. And then our ad valorem taxes we receive, those are used for roads that we have to maintain ourselves, used for dredging, public benefits. They're not used for salaries, things like that. So we're not getting subsidized by the county.
Commissioner Owen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And yeah, I serve on Port Tampa, and Charles and Gina have both voted against me before here on this board, so I don't know if that necessarily has any impact. And I never thought of that. As a matter of fact, not only do I think that would be inappropriate, I think it'd be very dangerous. And I don't want to speak for Commissioner Cohen or the Mayor of Tampa, but I'm on the board of the port, but I am not an expert in maritime like Charles here in front of me. So to me, if we are going to have a voting member of the port or from aviation, they need to be masters of the craft and understand every integral part of the organization. So if that can get back, Mr. Wong, that me as a board member of the port had absolutely zero intention of that being the case. I think it definitely, if we're going to have a voting member from both of these bodies, they have to be people that understand. That's probably why it's in their bylaws who they would appoint, is because you need the experts there at the table. Otherwise, why are they even there? So, and Johnny, as far as the TMAs, with Pinellas and Pasco, obviously we have 3 representatives here. Tell me, for even the public's purposes, what is the makeup of the TMA?
The TMA is 3 nominated, approved officials from each of the each MPO coming together, typically meet quarterly. In previous years, they've met more frequently on an ad hoc basis to resolve issues of regional significance. I believe that the TMA is created out of federal statute. So an urbanized area that meets or crosses a certain population threshold has to have a TMA group. What I've seen is they organize around issues of advocacy relating to regional facilities. Those could be highways, limited access facilities, trails, anything that's a regional asset, the TMA would take up as an issue.
Okay, well, let's narrow it down to this issue, to what we're talking about here. So we're having these TMA meetings, and you're getting input. We're getting input from the Pinellas TMA representatives as well as Pasco, and that's kind of what we're going off of when we're discussing these matters before this board. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, that's right. To my knowledge, I don't believe that Pinellas and Pasco have formalized the policy position approach in the way that we have. And so I mentioned this earlier in the year or late last year, that it would be helpful if our board makes decisions formally to transmit to the TMA. I don't know that that has been reciprocated on behalf of Pinellas and Pasco. So right now, we just have to trust that the TMA reps from those 2 counties are representing the will of their respective MPOs.
And that's what I'm having a hard time with. It seems a bit sloppy and unorganized. I don't mean that in any way. I think we have great representatives that are on the TMA, folks that I trust. But at the same time, it may not be the will of the complete body of the TPOs when you're talking about so few people making these discussions. I discussed this with you in our briefing, and I'd really just like to get input from other board members on this, because we're discussing these issues with it seems like we are narrowed down to a couple issues on this. And my worry is if we don't act, that the legislature will next year. I feel like enough warning shots have been fired over to us that if we mess this up, we're going to get into a forced situation where we have less control over what we're trying to do. And I know with our county commission, we have had extreme success with forming 2 regional board meetings with the county commissioners. I wanted to propose that and put that out there to see if, hey, well, rather than the TMA's meeting and coming back to us, it's kind of like when people get in a circle and they start whispering in people's ears. By the time it gets back to you, it's a little bit different. I'm a face-to-face kind of person, and I was wondering if we could create some type of super board meeting, like just one, where we could sit down with the other folks from the TPOs and state our positions on it. To me, I think that would be extremely constructive. I don't want to volunteer the port or the airport, but I know we have facilities that could probably house this. Again, I know that it's a lot of people at once, but I think that Commissioner Myers could chair it really good. And I would just like to get input from everybody else, because I think that would be very constructive to get the folks in the room that are doing all the talking and see if we could hash it out. So.
Mayor Kilton?
Yes, so, you know, I think I've been pretty consistent on my feelings that I think it's important for the Port and Aviation Authority to be represented by staff and not elected officials, so I continue to support that. But I think it's important that we have the expectation that if that's the agreed upon approach, that those 2 seats come off the top and not as part of the Hillsborough allocation. And I know you didn't ask for consensus today, but I think it's important for us to be able to go back and I don't have a hard line on any particular number. What's most important to me is an allocation that's, you know, a portion based on population. So whether we have 20 seats or 23, or I'm not married to any particular number, just what that's going to look like. And I think we also don't want to, we don't need to make it more complicated than it needs to be, right? So Pinellas has some issues that we don't have, in that they have a lot more cities than we do here. I don't want to get into trying to tell them how they want to apportion their seats, or them to tell us how we should apportion our seats. Let's let each jurisdiction decide. They get so many seats, let them do what they will with it. Let us do what we will with it in Hillsborough, and go from there. So Commissioner Owen, I appreciate your comments, but I think maybe for now, we continue on the way that we are, unless or until we hit a roadblock. So if they're making progress, then I think sometimes getting too many people in the room can be counterproductive. But I absolutely hear what you're saying. So I could go either way with it, but I would, you know, I think we've got, you know, great representation, and we're heading in the right direction. So if we do hit a roadblock, I'd be open to that. But I think for now, since we're getting there, I would suggest we stay the course.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hurtak?
I just have a small comment to say that in the letter that you write to both of the TPOs, you may, I think it would be great to include the makeup of both the port and the airport boards, so that they know exactly who it is. And I think we have very clear agreement that staff, however they want to define staff, would be the folks that would be manning those seats. But I think a lot of the question was, they just didn't know what you all do. They were, they didn't understand why you had the boards, what their purpose was, and makes a lot of sense. I mean, they don't deal with your boards on a regular basis. So I think by doing stuff like that, we can kind of help them feel more comfortable. And personally, I felt like they overall were not opposed to having the 2 members off the top. They weren't, I mean, I think we swayed them a little more toward it during the meeting, but they weren't opposed. No one said absolutely not, cannot do. So there was a sense of being able to work together on those issues.
Okay. Commissioner Wonstu?
I just wanted to quickly remind everyone that we already have a functioning representation of tri-county support with these same counties. I sit on Tampa Bay Water. We have not, in the past year and a half that I've been there, actively worked against one another. You sit with Commissioner Eggers on the TMA. He sits on Tampa Bay Water already. I mean, this is just more commingling. I voted no on the last ratios of how, I think it's too many chefs in the kitchen. It creates too much confusion, difficult. We only have, I believe, 9 on Tampa Bay Water. It's nothing personal. I don't believe that NGOs deserve to have the opportunity to dilute the vote and voice of duly elected representatives. So I will continue to vote no against anything that supports those authorities being on the representation for that and that reason only. But there's already a representation. That should be the communication. We know we can work well on Tampa Bay Water. We never act against another county's interests. I don't act. City of St. Petersburg has representation there. We never act against their interests when they have a need. We don't Pasco County's commissioners, so on and so forth. So I think that that's just a very important dynamic that we need to acknowledge in these TMA meetings, is that we already have proof that the tri-county representation can work for regional improvements and safety of everyone, and that's all that the regional TPO would be. So thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Gina.
Thank you. If it would be helpful, and I don't know if I'm just throwing this out there, to provide as well our passenger data from Pinellas and Pasco. We have the same number of passengers that originate from Pinellas County that we do Hillsborough County. And I think that possibly showing the TMA those numbers, Dr. Wong, if you think that would be something that they would be interested in including, that way it kind of just adds that piece to it of they should want a say in how people are accessing the airport.
I'll speak for myself that I would love to have access to that data, because this topic will undoubtedly come back again at the TMA in hopes of resolving these two issues. So whatever information or data or analysis you can provide me, I think that would only assist in having a productive conversation. Thank you.
Not sure.
Yeah,
Councilman.
I disagree with Commissioner Owen about the size of the committee. I've been a part of some of these cattle calls, and really good work never comes from too many people. I agree with Commissioner Wastel on my preference. Of course, I expressed it before, would be the smaller committee, but in the interest of moving this forward, I went along and voted in favor of our consensus of 25. So I'll continue to support that. I would actually move that we forward the recommendation to our representatives on the TMA to stand by our number of 25 and to consent to the larger group that we agree that the representatives from the Port Authority, the Aviation Authority, will be staff, and go forth and conquer. It seems to me that one of the things, just an observation, because I haven't been here that long, is I've actually been impressed. I don't ever feel as though, even though it's like for the small cities, even like the city of Tampa, I never feel as though anyone is working against the interest of the city of Tampa or Plant City or Temple Terrace, or just because of our size or our status. I always feel like when we're doing these, for the most part, now everybody has self-interest if they represent in certain areas, but I always feel like there's a great deal of support amongst this for everybody when they express real, true needs. So I understand the other counties fearful of that rising, but I think that people are trying to do their best for everybody at this meeting, and I think that will continue on at the three counties.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Okay, hold on one second. Mayor Ross.
This good discussion, thank you, and Commissioner Owen, respectfully, I think in this process we seem to be making progress. Now this is the very beginning of this, but we've had a couple meetings. We seem to be building trustful relationships with our counterparts and having good, candid dialogue between Pasco and Pinellas, and I hear what you're saying about getting this large group of county commissioners together, but there are a lot. If we could get this pushed through, this will be the miracle of miracles, because there's so many people that have to approve this. All the TPOs have to approve it. All three county commissioners have to approve it. The city of Tampa has to approve. There's a lot of people that have to get buy-in to make this thing happen. And the three representatives of this board, I will tell you, we did not get out over our skis. We represented the vote of this board. We didn't overstate based on what our home positions might be. I'm at Temple Terrace or Tampa or whatever. Nobody did that. Everybody carried the torch that this board voted on. And I would ask you on board size and stuff to give us a little room to talk here, because if we go in there and we've got everything here that we vote on is just etched in stone, we don't have anything to you know, we've become a megaphone at that point. We don't have any dialogue. So give us a little, you know, we told them last time that this board was pretty dug in, and it wasn't unanimous, but it was close, about having the airport and the port represented and that those seats come off the top. We dug in on that. We told them that was a firm position of the Hillsborough board. The board size, we went with 25, but we told them there's probably a little wiggle room there. If somebody's got a lot of heartburn and we wind up with 21, I don't think the sky would fall. We would be willing to come back to Hillsborough's board and present that option. Of course, it's up to this group collectively, but it seems to be going well now. I think we have candid discussions going on. At some point, if we hit a roadblock, maybe we have to do something different. But I would respectfully ask that we continue on the course that we're on. We kind of laid out a framework for how this process is going to occur over the next year or so, and we seem to be progressing. The discussion the other day was actually better than I expected it to be. I really expected, you know, a hell no to the airport and the port, and we didn't get that. As far as having, I think they're looking for an assurance that it will be staff and not just not elected officials. I don't think they're going to want to see board members. I don't think that provides the same level of, and I don't see a problem with that because I think that was our intent when we voted on that anyway, that it be staff. I think that's all we need this morning is an assurance to say it will be staff. That's the only thing that we're asking for this morning is that. And we'll come back to you on board size as the discussion.
I was going to say, as the maker of the motion, if he's okay with that, I would be willing to give the TMA members the latitude to negotiate numbers from 22 to 25.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
And just a suggestion in an effort to keep the dialogue moving and prevent kind of back and forth, in the event that there's additional questions and follow-up from Pasco and Pinellas, would it make sense to have representatives from the Aviation Authority and the port attend the next TMA meeting so they can address questions from them directly at that time?
That's a good point. Commissioner Owen.
Yeah, and I think, Councilman, I was wanting to clarify the motion and what we're doing because, Councilman, I know you mentioned that you're amending it to basically leave open from 21 to 25. I just want to make sure I have this right. And then we're also going to state that if the port and aviation have a voting seat, it will not be an elected representative from the commission or mayor of Tampa. So we're going to, I guess, clarify. I just want to make sure we're clarifying the right things to the other bodies.
That's a motion.
Is that?
Chair, if I may restate, what I have is this approval will allow me to transmit the memo. The information to include will be that the regional operators, aviation and port authority will be represented by staff.
That's correct.
I think it was important to clarify that it wasn't just elected officials on the board, it was no governing board members whatsoever, staff, and that may require a definition to be included in the bylaws of what staff means. And then Councilman Clendenin, you added motion not to be, or a provision not to be included in the memo, but to give TMA representatives latitude to negotiate board size between 22 and 25. Is that right?
Okay, and I guess I'm okay with that as long as, well, were you done? I'm sorry. Okay. But what Mayor Kilton said, I think, is very compelling, that we are stating that proportionality based on population. I think that would be negligent on our part to not state that position, that, because I agree with you, Mayor, that if we're having a lower number of folks, as long as the population determines proportionality, I think that that's very important for us to clarify as they drive the number up and down.
Hold on.
Okay, go ahead.
We're going to get an opinion from legal.
Just to follow up on that, and the language in both federal and state law is a little less than it might be, but it does state at the creation of MPOs in federal law that it's supposed to be proportional to population size. It's the primary goal. Now, with redesignations, it doesn't make that same point, but it does seem to flow logically that that's the function, yes.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. And then, so I guess then when we're taking off the top, that's the big question then. Because population, go ahead.
Right, and I think my understanding of what the discussion has been is when you take off the top, instead of divvying up your proportionality between 25 seats, now you're starting with 22 and coming up with a proportional number from that. That was my understanding of what the board's been discussing. Is that correct? So
Right.
I think that, and remember, the membership of MPOs has flexibility in terms of, I mean, you don't even really need, or you're not required by state or federal law to have some of the agencies that we have on our MPO presently, but you can. The only requirements are county commissioners, city officials from cities over 50,000 population. But it doesn't say that you can't have these members. We've added the school board relatively recently. So that you have flexibility there, but that determination obviously has to be agreed upon between the three MPOs as to what that means. But your point about it being reflective of population proportionality of the entire TMA is consistent, I think, with what the law requires.
Got it. And Mayor Ross, I guess if you could, because we obviously weren't at the meeting, so as far as taking the port and the airport off the top, was that something that seemed non-negotiable on their part? Could you clarify that again? If we're going back and digging our heels in right now on that, is that something you think that kind of makes the wheels fall off, I guess?
Yeah, truthfully, folks, I think we're kind of overthinking this a little bit. The only thing we need this morning from this board that we're asking for is a clarification that the two representatives of the authorities will be staff and not board members. That's all we need. This board has already voted and taken a position on board size and the fact that the authorities would be coming off the top and not part of Hillsborough. We've already covered that. So with respect, I would respectfully request that the motion just be confined to giving us the authority to say Hillsborough has provided you assurance that those two seats will be occupied by staff members and not board members. That's all we need. And we will be coming back to you because the next thing will be then we get into the apportionment discussion, board size, and apportionment, which is governed by population rate. That's another discussion that will come back for another round of, but we're not there yet. We don't need you to tweak the board size guidance that you already gave the three of us. We already have that.
Okay, all right, so Mayor Ross kind of has really narrowed it down to that. So if you could read back so that we all know the motion then, because that seems different. So I just wanted us to be correct on our motion.
We would need Councilman Clinton to restate the motion based on what we've just heard.
Yes,
specifically.
so just for clarification, because I thought part of the issue was you wanted the latitude to be able to negotiate down from 25.
Yeah, but
right,
we will, obviously, we have to come back to you. I mean, if we get in there and they say, okay, now we're starting at 23, so this is how we want to divide it up, we would come, and they say, well, somebody only wants 19, and that's what they want. I don't know what they're going to want, but.
With our previous direction, you'd almost have to walk out at an impasse because we basically said 25. So that's why I was trying to give you guys the latitude to be able to do what you needed to do.
We wouldn't walk out in impasse. We would say, well, we'll go back to the group and present it.
Without having to go back to the group.
And we would either come back to you and say, we think they're.
If you don't need it, that's fine. I was trying to help you out and give you a little bit of latitude to negotiate.
I think we're good. I think right now, all we're trying to do is get clarification that we're not trying to sneak another representative of Hillsborough in, that we truly want to have Joe or Gina or Charles or whoever is going to represent the port. That's all they're looking for at this point.
So I withdraw the amendment and if that's okay?
Yes.
Second amendment. And I'll restate an amendment that we give the TMA board the latitude, or I guess they don't need latitude, the direction to exclude or have only staff from Port Authority and the Aviation Authority, and that those numbers come off the top.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposers? That motion is carried. Thank you so much for a wonderful discussion. Okay. Okay, now we can move to status reports. What's it? Todd Stennis, moving to status reports. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
Members of the TPO Board. It's a pleasure to be with you all this morning. My name is Todd Stennis. I'm Amtrak's Director of Government Affairs. I'm out of New Orleans, Louisiana, resident of Mississippi. I cover all of Amtrak's state and local government affairs matters throughout the Southeast, Texas and Oklahoma, all the way over to Virginia. So I'm a rubber band that goes between 11 states at any given time. I wanted to speak to you today about the Amtrak service that you have in Florida and give you a little bit of background on who we are and how we got to where we are. Just a quick question I always like to ask, have any of you traveled Amtrak before? Okay, several of you have. How many of you have just a 30,000-foot view of how Amtrak came to be? Okay, a few. All right, so let me just give you a quick 101 on Amtrak and how Amtrak came to be. The railroad industry has been in place in this country for nearly 200 years. When the railroads came to be, they were given the land to build the railroads on, with the understanding that their common carrier obligation would include moving people. Fast forward to the post-World War II era, the federal government is investing in highways and the interstate system as well as airports, and all of a sudden the railroad industry starts to take a hit on intercity passenger rail service. We get into the late 1960s, and the icing on the cake were really two major things. One, the loss of the postal contract, and two, the bankruptcy of the Northeastern Railroads, creating Penn Central, which turned out to be the largest bankruptcy in U.S. history, U.S. corporate history at that time. The railroads came to the federal government with the question of, we need help, we need out of this common carrier obligation that we have to carry people. We need a way out. 20 railroads came to the government, and out of that came the Rail Passenger Services Act of 1971, which created Amtrak. Those 20 railroads paid into Amtrak with cash, equipment, and other assets. Today, Amtrak is a 21,000-mile network operating over most of those railroads and their successors today, with just a little bit of the railroad that we actually own and operate, which is primarily in the Northeast Corridor. This is what the Amtrak network looks like. Just a quick description. The goal lines are the long-distance routes. We have 15 of those I'm going to tell you about in just a few minutes. And we also have the Northeast Corridor in red, and we have the state-supported routes in blue. And one thing I failed to mention, I have two colleagues online with us, Joe Barr, who is our Director of Network Development, and also Shannon Flaherty, who is our Government Affairs Manager out of Raleigh, so forgive me for not introducing them at the beginning of my presentation. Just to get into going back to that 1971 act that created Amtrak, there were two key things that came out of it. One was the right of preference, and the other was access to the railroad. So Amtrak enjoys that right of preference to get on any railroad in the country to operate passenger service over. Obviously, we have to negotiate the necessary fees to operate over those railroads, and we also enjoy preference. Now, the key to preference is the railroads are supposed to operate our passenger trains in front of everything else as far as passenger and first-class service. So the passenger trains fall in that category, and that's where they're supposed to operate. Sometimes that doesn't exactly happen that way. So as I mentioned earlier, we've got three key models of service. We have the Northeast Corridor, which primarily is Boston to Washington, D.C. And again, as I mentioned earlier, Amtrak owns the bulk of that mileage there, where we operate at speeds between 125 and 155 miles per hour today. Then we have the state-supported network, and I'm going to touch on that just a little bit more. Those are our routes that are less than 750 miles. We have 17 state partners and a couple of different state agencies, intrastate agencies that operate those services, or we operate those services for. And then we have the long-distance network, which makes up 15 trains that we operate around the country that are in excess of 750 miles. Just to get into the details on the state-supported side, in 2008, Congress passed the PREA legislation, which was the Passenger Rail Investment and Improvement Act, and that kind of changed how Amtrak funded intercity passenger rail service. Section 209 of that law specifically states that any service that is less than 750 miles, the primary cost will be borne by the states. So we had several routes that fell in that category, and they were given a 4-year window to shift the cost from the federal government over to the states. One of those states being the Commonwealth of Virginia. In the southeast also, we've got North Carolina as well. But today, that is where our primary growth factor is in the routes that are less than 750 miles. Then we have the long-distance network, as I mentioned earlier. The long-distance network is anything over 750 miles. Florida is served by 3 of our long-distance trains in the southeast. You're served by the auto train, which is unique to Florida. We have that service that operates between Sanford and Lorton, Virginia every day. Then you are also served by the Silver Meteor and the Silver Star, with the Silver Star being the service that comes into Tampa from the northeast and coming out of Miami from the south. This is what our service model looks like in Florida right now. Currently, we are right at 936,000 passengers a year. That was in FY23. You see that what our route structure looks like coming down out of Jacksonville through Orlando into Tampa and then down to Miami. I will mention that Tampa has the second highest total ridership of any non-auto train facility in the state of Florida, at just over, right at 130,000 passengers. Orlando is right in front of you with 135,000 passengers. But the key to the difference between those two, I might mention, is Orlando is served by 2 trains. You all are served by 1 here in Tampa, so I just thought that was unique to point out. We are also making a major investment in ADA work throughout the country at stations where Amtrak has the responsibility to invest in ADA. This is the list of stations that we have in Florida, and this is where we are as far as the stages of each of those projects. Several of them are complete. Tampa is one of those that is complete. If you've been to Tampa Union Station in the last couple of years, we built a brand new high-level, 48-inch high-level boarding platform there to serve the Silver Star and any future expansion opportunities that we might have here in Florida. So many of you may be familiar with the IIJA funding. The $66 billion that Congress appropriated for intercity passenger rail. There is a misperception, though, about those funds. There are a lot of people that believe that $66 billion went to Amtrak. It did not go to Amtrak. A significant portion of it, $44 billion, went to the Federal Railroad Administration to be administered through a grant program. $22 billion did go to Amtrak, and it was specifically cited to go to specific capital projects that had to be invested in around the country. But as you can see, the other $44 billion are divvied up in non-NEC grants and then NEC grants and multi-purpose grants as well. I'm going to ask my colleague Joe Barr to speak to you about the Carter ID program, which is really where the focus is on expansion opportunities, and that's in our next slide here. Joe, are you with us?
I am. Hopefully you can hear me. So good morning to everyone. Again, Joe Barr, Director of Network Development East, and I work on service expansion projects up and down the East Coast from Quebec all the way down to Florida. So in the IIJA, there was a program that was created called Corridor ID or CID, or Corridor Identification and Development, or CID, that's basically where most of the energy and work in expanding passenger rail service lies within the IIJA. In late last year, the FRA announced 69 applications had been accepted into the Corridor ID program. Most were led by states, a couple were led by Amtrak. In Florida, as you can see in the box, there were 2 projects that were selected, one between Jacksonville, Orlando, and Miami, and another between Miami, Orlando, and Tampa. And the way the program works is that the successful applicants start out by getting $500,000 or up to $500,000 in 100% federal funding to do scoping work for what's called the Service Development Plan, and also make sure that they have the right staffing and consultant support to move forward. And then based on that scope and budget that they prepare, they will then be provided with additional federal funding at a 90-10 split to allow them to move forward with that service development plan, which basically defines all of the different aspects of what the project will look like, costs, next steps, all of the transportation planning and environmental review, not the NEPA, but the sort of initial environmental screening that will happen. So on the next slide, you can sort of see how the FRA lays out their project planning process, all the way from early systems planning all the way through into operation. And Corridor ID really covers the second and third of those arrows. And for anyone who might be familiar with the FTAs, new starts, or capital investment grant process. This is fairly similar to that conceptually and shares a lot of characteristics. But basically, Corridor ID gets projects through that initial scoping, and then through project planning, which is that service development plan, and then through project development, which is preliminary engineering, as well as a NEPA review and any other local or state environmental reviews that have to occur. And then the idea is that then sets up a pipeline of projects that allow for those projects to be funded for final design and construction, and then moving into operation of new services. So if Florida DOT is successful in moving those two corridors forward, this set of arrows provides the kind of roadmap, starting with Corridor ID and then moving into other funding programs for how they would get those projects from the early planning stages where they are now all the way through to, like I said, final design, construction, and eventual operation. The other piece of the puzzle on the next slide is the FRA's long distance study, which I know some folks in Tampa had been paying close attention to. This is another IIJ requirement and really looks at the feasibility and cost of expanding the long distance service, the more than 750-mile services that Todd mentioned. Within Florida, you can see on the map on the upper right, there were two proposals for additional service that were actually just released last month by the FRA. One connecting Dallas-Fort Worth to Miami, kind of along the Gulf Coast to Jacksonville, and then down the east coast of Florida, and then another connecting Chicago to Miami, but going via Orlando. The line doesn't quite get to Tampa, but I don't think that's determinative of where the service would actually go. But basically, if these were implemented, they would take Florida from 2 trains a day currently, that Todd mentioned, to 4 trains a day, or 4 routes under this proposal. There's lots more work to be done on this. This is very early system planning, kind of that first arrow in the diagram I just showed. But they're working on completing the study later this year. There will be another series of public meetings, I think probably over the summer, early summer or late spring. So I would definitely encourage the TPO and others to participate in those meetings when they get announced and held, like I said, later this year. And so between Corridor ID and the long distance study, that will really define the future of passenger rail expansion in the United States moving forward. Finally, on our last slide, I believe, just talking about partnership, I'm going to talk about the last item around Corridor ID. We're excited to work with all of the stakeholders, whether that's states or MPOs or local governments, what have you, to help move these projects forward. I would definitely encourage folks who are interested in seeing more passenger rail in Florida and in Tampa specifically, to engage with those service development plans. There's going to be stakeholder and public outreach required as part of that, and really, to help to identify the political champions for this, because like Todd will mention in a minute, funding is key. There's a lot of federal funding, but not nearly enough. And there's also a need for local match and other state sponsorship to get these projects to actually be in operation. So I'll turn it back to Todd briefly to close out.
Sure, thanks, Joe. Just a couple of things that I wanted to mention. We have a monthly meeting with FDOT on Amtrak-related projects throughout Florida. As you probably know, we've got the facility in Sanford that supports the auto train, as well as our long-distance facility in Hialeah that maintains a significant portion of our long-distance equipment that we operate in, the single-level long-distance equipment that we operate in the eastern U.S. So we are routinely in contact with FDOT, just keeping up with projects that are directly involved with us. One thing is, as Joe mentioned, as it relates to the Corridor ID program, the key is to the Corridor ID program, and frankly, any federal program that's going to be used to expand intercity passenger rail service. With the Corridor ID program, the next phase beyond this initial $500,000 investment per route that the FRA is making is the next step is going to require a 10% match. The subsequent steps after that are going to require a 20% match. So anytime that a state and or other government entity that's qualified for that investment is available to do so, those matches are going to be required. One thing that I would ask of you all, if you are pushing to see expanded intercity passenger rail service here in Hillsborough County, is identify those champions in the state and local level that can help secure those funds at the state and local level to match these federal grant programs. I can assure you other states are going after it as hard as they can. With the $44 billion that's out there, there are many states that want to see expanded inner-city passenger rail service, and this is the vehicle, if I may. Just to put things in perspective, up until IIJA, if you wanted to see expanded inner-city passenger rail service, it was 100% on the states to address the capital needs as well as the operating support. So now all of a sudden you have a federal mechanism in place here, at least for the time being, that is going to provide an 80%, up to an 80% match for the bulk of the capital that would have to be done. I'm happy to answer any questions at this time, and we can go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Stennis. A very interesting presentation. Board members, questions? Commissioner Kemp?
I just like to thank you for all that information. It's very exciting. You know, I know there's been lots of public conversations on social media and everything about Tampa being bypassed on the Chicago to Miami route as well. I've heard so much over time, and it's been such a problem that there's only one train a day going from Tampa to Miami, and we have no other connections, you know, in that way. And I have always been desperate to find out what we could do, need to do, to increase the number of trains, 2 or 3 or 4 a day from Tampa to Miami. And I know you address that generally, like, do you have any specifics with regards to that? I just think it's so important.
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Barr actually addressed that when he mentioned that FDOT did apply for successfully, and they have been awarded Carter ID grants for the routes that come into Tampa. So that's the first step in the FRA's program, and that's why I was saying it's so critical that the subsequent steps that are going to require state and or local matches, that you all are in a position to do so. Just to give you an example, the state of Louisiana just 2 years ago, through their legislative process, went ahead and appropriated dollars for LADOTD to use to match any of these federal grant programs that I just cited under IIJA. So they have money in the bank at the DOTD with the specific purpose of matching those grant programs, so that they're in a position that they don't have to go back to the legislature for every single step of the way. They've got money in the bank to start that process. They were the first state to do that.
And that was the FDOT or the DOT in Louisiana that's holding that money?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
And then one other, for any citizens, for any other people, where should they be looking to see when these meetings take place and how they can get engaged? Because I think there's a lot of people that would like to be.
Relative to the FRA long distance study, that is on the FRA's website. Joe, are you still with us?
I am.
Do you happen to, if we have that link, can you just text it to me, and I'll leave it here with the TPO so that they can have that information relative to the public comments of the FRA long distance study going forward when those sessions take place?
I can also drop it in the chat for the meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, council, board members, I just want to remind everybody to be mindful of time. Councilmember Hurtak.
Yes, thank you. A lot of people were very concerned when Tampa was not included on the long distance. So I just want to ask for the public, what was the rationale behind that? Was it because we're not far along in this other survey? Like, why? I just want to point blank ask why Tampa was ignored.
I don't want to pass the buck, but honestly, it's not an Amtrak-led matter. It's a Federal Railroad Administration-led matter, and that's why I've said it's for you guys to make sure it's a critical path for you to make certain that the FRA is hearing from you on that matter.
Okay, and I have a question then for Secretary Gwynn. If FDOT has gotten this grant for these corridors, is the next step going to be asking the state for these matches? Will we expect FDOT assistance in that, or is that going to be on us as county and city electeds?
I think we'd have to just look at each example. You know, it's hard to say what will happen on something we haven't even gotten into the process yet, but I can say there is money in the DOT budget every year for different modes, and so I'm sure that, you know, each project will be looked at on its merits.
Okay, I just wondered if there was a priority for that. Additionally, Dr. Wong, do you receive emails from Amtrak about these types of meetings?
No, not currently, but as a result of scheduling this presentation, I was able to thankfully get in touch with Todd and Joe and meet some members of their staff as well. We do receive updates from Federal Rail Administration, but only on an ad hoc basis.
Because I was wondering, I thought it would be great is when you have these types of presentations or you have these group meetings, if you could just make sure that Dr. Wong or his staff receives it, and then they will simply share with the rest of us, and then we can share with our constituents. It'll create a nice pattern and not have people have to search for it.
Absolutely, and that's why it was so important for, as Joe mentioned earlier, he's going to drop the FRA link in that follows the FRA study, since it's really their project on the long distance study.
Sure.
Yep.
Does that work though? If
Yes, certainly.
sharing that information?
And we can include that in every monthly packet.
Great, I greatly appreciate it. And thank you so much for your presentation today.
Yes, ma'am.
It was excellent.
Councilmember Clenenden.
Yeah, sorry to take up a limited amount of time, but I've just clarification. Between the cities of Tampa and Orlando, we have rail infrastructure. And clearly there's been a market study because Brightline is, somewhere down in the distant future, they're going to hopefully be providing that type of service. How is it in your business model that Amtrak hasn't been able to seize that opportunity to provide frequent rail service between the city of Tampa and the city of Orlando?
Well, again, as I mentioned earlier, when the PREA legislation was passed, that changed the dynamic of how the short distance service operates. So it's up to the state to lead that effort. In some places we have other agencies, such as in California, you have joint powers authorities there that can do it. But in the case of Florida, as far as intercity passengers, so I want to make sure that we have a clarification of the difference between intercity and commuter. Amtrak cannot operate commuter service under our charter. We can only operate intercity service. So in this case, relative to the federal law requirements, the state would have to lead that effort. And again, that's what the beginning of the Corridor ID program does. Okay. And you guys are in the Corridor ID program via FDOT. They made the application successfully.
So prior to the Corridor ID program, what was the vehicle?
There was no real vehicle. It was a matter of the states still coming up, but there wasn't a vehicle to drive it. Right.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Mr. Willis, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, I think there's some legislation, I don't know if it's passed yet, but this session regarding transit and unused capital dollars for new starts and small starts, I think, getting pushed towards the SIS, the Strategic Intermodal System. So most of the rail corridors, I think, are on that. I'll let FDOT maybe clarify that, but that could be a potential funding source for this small next 10%, 20% phase, and maybe help push some of the passenger rail stuff forward, since transit projects are just going to this session have also just become harder to deliver with certain legislation, and we're still absent a robust local funding source for transit. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Willis.
Oh, yeah, and one other thing. The $44 billion is specific to Amtrak, or is that funding something that Brightline could tap into?
It is specific to the FRA, and the FRA has it through a grant program that is going through different, there's multiple different grants that are eligible for different parties to apply for.
Okay. And that's separate from infra. Sorry.
I was going to say the Corridor ID program is very specifically operator agnostic. So yes, Brightline or any other potential private operator is in fact eligible for it.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Willis. Other board members? Mr. Stennis, thank you very much to you and your team for spending some time with us this morning, and thank you for traveling to be with us, and it was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and feel free to call on us anytime if we can be of assistance going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Our next presentation is regarding the PD&E study on Gibsonton Drive, and Ashley Hensel from FDOT is here to present. So we are about 11 minutes out from our normal cutoff time, so I don't know, we're going to try to push through. The next item, C, is going to be deferred to April, and then we still have to get through Dr. Wong's report. So if you can, although it's, I'm sure, inconvenient, if you're able to hang out a few minutes so we don't have a mass exodus at 12 o'clock, that would be helpful. Thank you. All right, Ms. Hensel, you are up.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Ashley Hensel. I'm a representative of the Florida Department of Transportation. I'm here today to update the board on the status of this PD&E study and give you an overview of the public hearing that was held on February 20th. This PD&E study is in coordination with Hillsborough County. It's along Gibsonton Drive from Fernhill Drive to US 301. Gibsonton Drive is a county roadway. The length of the project is just under 1 mile. The existing roadway has 4 travel lanes, 2 in each direction. There are existing sidewalks on both sides except for a small gap west of Kenda Drive. The existing right-of-way width varies throughout the corridor from 125 to 150 feet. The no-build alternative, which involves only routine maintenance, will remain a viable alternative during the PD&E study. The purpose of this project is to address future roadway capacity issues as well as improve safety conditions. Gibsonton Drive exhibits crash rates which are higher than the statewide average for similar state facilities. The project will also provide improved mobility for pedestrians and bicyclists along the corridor. Expanding Gibsonton Drive from 4 to 6 lanes is consistent with the cost-feasible plan portion of the 2045 Hillsborough County TPO's long-range transportation plan. There are no phases for design, right-of-way, or construction funded in the CIP or the current FDOT 5-year work program. Through coordination with Hillsborough County staff, the preferred alternative includes widening Gibsonton Drive from 4 to 6 lanes with a 22-foot wide median. There will be 2 11-foot lanes and 1 12-foot travel lane in each direction with curb and gutter and a 10-foot wide sidewalk on each side of the roadway. 1 new off-site stormwater management site and 1 new floodplain compensation site are needed to accommodate the proposed improvements. Up to 30 feet of additional right-of-way is required along the north side of Gibsonton Drive, and up to 7 feet of additional right-of-way is needed on the south side as you approach US 301. Our project team evaluated environmental effects in the alternatives analysis. There are no significant impacts to natural or cultural resources, contamination sites, and noise abatements is not feasible or cost reasonable. To accommodate the roadway widening and anticipated off-site stormwater and floodplain compensation sites, acquisition of additional right-of-way is anticipated. 20 parcels may be affected, 18 of those partially impacted, and 2 full parcels, which includes 3 potential residential relocations and 1 potential business relocation. The evaluation matrix compares the right-of-way acquisition requirements, environmental impacts, and costs of the preferred build alternative to the no-build. The preliminary cost of the project, including design, right-of-way acquisition, and construction phases, is just over $38 million in today's costs. The public hearing was held on February 20th at the Riverview Public Library with an option to attend virtually through a GoToWebinar. The open house was being held beginning at 5:30 with a formal portion starting at 6:30. Following the formal public comment period, the open house resumed until 7:30. Draft study documents were available at the public hearing location along with display boards, project roll plots, and an informational project video. The comment period ran from January 29th through March 1st. Comments received between this time frame became part of the official public hearing record. Newsletter notices were mailed to property owners within 500 feet of the corridor to notify and invite them to the hearing. Advertisements and notices were placed in the newspapers, posted to the FDOT public information website, our project website, sent to elected officials, stakeholders, and other agencies. You can see on the slide the information about the number of attendees, both in person and virtually, as well as the number of comments we received. Overall, the comments related to concerns regarding access management and median changes from full openings to directional openings. This is where we are in the process. We're currently wrapping up our environmental and engineering documents and plan to submit to OEM central office for their review by the end of April. We anticipate location and design concept acceptance by this summer. You can visit the project website located here, or scan the QR code to get to the project website for additional information. And my contact information is up on the screen as well if you have any questions. Thank you for your time today. We look forward to any comments or questions you may have. And remember to be alert today, alive tomorrow. Safety doesn't happen by accident.
Thank you, Ms. Hensel. Very good presentation. Board members, are there questions? Yes, Mr. Slater.
Just one, Ashley, I just want to say thank you for the presentation. I know you guys are much further along than we are in our study of a potential expressway extension down 301. And I understand our teams are coordinating, so we'll just we're going to keep an eye on to make sure we're kind of coordinating with you on what we're thinking about in partnership with FDOT as well.
Sounds good.
Board members, other questions? Very good. Thank you, Ms. Hensel.
Thank
Very
you.
good. Dr. Wong.
Thank you, board members. I'm going to go at light speed with my report to get us out of here on time, hopefully. Legislative update first. On March 8th, the 2024 session concluded. Two bills that we were tracking pretty closely, House Bill 7049 and Senate Bill 1032, which would have abolished the MPO Advisory Council and then required DOT to grade MPOs on a scorecard, were not passed. House Bill 1301, I don't know the Senate companion, unfortunately, was passed and has a number of implications for TPO business. The first of which that I'd like to draw to your attention is that it requires any governmental entity that proposes a lane elimination or lane repurposing to conduct a traffic study assessing the impacts on safety and congestion. It also includes some other public notice requirements, but those are already part of the process for our local governments. We're seeking clarification on this provision because it could impact development of the Hart Arterial BRT study on Florida Tampa, as well as the connection east-west to Fowler. It's my understanding that Hart is the governmental entity which proposed the project, but that FDOT completed the traffic study. What's unclear from the language is whether another government entity, i.e. not Hart, may complete those studies on Hart's behalf, or whether Hart would have to take those on and still be in compliance with the statute. Another provision would require any lane elimination or repurposing specifically for a transit project to be approved by a 2/3 vote of the transit board. Another provision which has impacts is that it places limits on the state transportation trust fund contributions to transit providers, public use airports, as well as ports. The increased revenues from limiting the contributions to those authorities would be put back into the state trust fund and must be prioritized for arterial highway projects. Justin, Mr. Willits mentioned this, and he was correct. Unallocated new and small starts funds get returned to the state transportation trust fund as well, and those are prioritized for highway improvements. Another bill that we are tracking, House Bill 287, was also passed, and that limits the state transportation trust fund contributions to transit projects, capping them at 20%. There are some exceptions, including exceptions to use that money to match federal dollars. That's it for my legislative update. The regular TPO board meeting will be held April 10th. The special meeting will be April 30th. I did submit a letter to the Federal Rail Administration, staff letter of comment. As Todd Stennis and Joe Barr mentioned, the Federal Rail Administration published its long-range vision plan. We sent a letter of comment asking them to reconsider the route from Chicago to Miami, which bypasses Tampa. There's no harm in including Tampa as a stop. There is harm in excluding it, because that means that route would no longer be eligible for federal funds, and we want to keep our funding options open if we decide to move forward with that service sometime in the future. Also sending a letter of support to FDOT to reconsider prioritizing the Gulf Coast Trail as #1 priority on its list for Sun Trail funding. A number of projects that comprise the Gulf Coast Trail are already adopted into our transportation improvement program, including the South Coast Greenway, the Selman Greenway, Tampa's Green Spine, the Greenway along I-275, and the Dale Mabry pedestrian overpass. So it kind of makes sense to lump those all together as part of the Gulf Coast Trail build-out and ask the state to prioritize them for funding. That's it for me. Thank you.
Well, actually, I have a question for Wong and Secretary Gwynn. So the implications of the pulling the money back, streetcar funding.
Well, first of all, we don't know whether the bill will be signed, so it's still open legislation that hasn't been signed yet. My understanding is that this is allowing for money that is not utilized in a particular fiscal year to be used for other purposes. It doesn't mandate it has to. And I'm sure each project will be looked at on its own. The challenge, and I've expressed this to the city before, is we've rolled that money several years in a row. And at some point, they're like, we want to put that money to use. I think what's happened around the state is there's been a lot of New Starts funding that has no local project to fund. And so they wanted to say, well, instead of just letting that money sit there in the bank, let's put it to use. And if it's not on that particular purpose, maybe there's another purpose, so.
So, I mean, we allocated $5 million this year to start the process to get this thing going again. So, I mean, we're actually moving forward on the streetcar project. So, okay, very good.
Yeah, just to confirm, we've reinitiated those quarterly meetings with FTA on the streetcar. So the city and Hart are working together to get our ducks in a row to utilize the several $1 million for project development and show progress, which would hopefully make DOT's life easier as well.
Commissioner Kemp.
And I didn't catch quite all and I'll look over it more closely, but the 2/3 vote of a transit board for transit projects and things like that. It seems like there's only 3 transit boards in the state of Florida, from what I can tell. Hillsborough, Pinellas, and I guess Lynx, which has like 5 members that are, that's it. So I guess it would only be a directive to those, when they say transit board, it only applies to these 3 transit agencies?
I'm not terribly familiar with the number of transit boards. I do believe that Hart would be affected by that based on my reading of the bill, but I'm going to defer to anyone with a more expert reading of that material to answer any questions.
My understanding, although I'll double check, my understanding, basically what it's saying is that when you have a lane elimination project, there has to be a sponsor for the project. And typically, it's either a transit agency, an MPO, a local government, depending on what it is. What they're saying is that if a lane repurposing is being proposed to accommodate a transit project, then the sponsor has, if they have a board, it has to have a 2/3 vote of that board to support it.
So, and I don't expect you to know this, but I'm just curious, because if we move to, for instance, Pasco, or we go to Sarasota or Manatee, where their transit agencies are a county department, and as well, like airports and ports, as we've discussed before. But, so does that mean, or do you have any idea? Like, does that mean the county commission in those places? Does that mean
I would think maybe I shouldn't think, but I would think it would be the agency that oversees that. It could be the county. If it's a county department, I would assume that it would perhaps, but that's probably a legal question that needs to be looked at further.
And maybe we could look at that.
I really looked at it from it does seem to apply to Hart and PSTA.
Right.
Who typically I wouldn't expect a Pasco County or Hernando or Citrus to come in with a lane repurposing for transit. So
No, except that maybe something like Sarasota would, or that's why I was trying to think of an example that might.
Yeah, I
And
don't
so
know
I was
outside
trying
of
to
my
think of a
district.
parallel, and also the Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, those, Orange County. That's why I was trying to understand what the implications were for us as opposed to anything else.
Okay, board members, other questions under Executive Director's report? Okay, we'll move on to old business and new business. Any old business or new business? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn? Everybody in favor? All right. Thank you, everybody.